The dust devils swirled across the horizon like dancing ghosts when Olivia Dawson discovered her father's body in the barn, a heart seizure that had taken him swift and silent in the night, leaving her alone with 300 head of cattle and a contract that would expire in 30 days if she did not deliver them to the railhead in Prescott, Arizona. She stood in the doorway of their modest ranch house outside of Las Cruces, New Mexico, the morning of his funeral, watching the cattle graze across the scrubland that stretched endlessly in every direction. 23 years old, unmarried and now utterly alone in the spring of 1884, she had two choices: sell the herd for a fraction of its worth to the vultures already circling, or drive them herself across 250 miles of unforgiving territory. Her father had taught her everything about working cattle, about reading the land, about survival, but he had never imagined she would have to do it without him. The funeral was small. 3 neighbors, the circuit preacher, and old Miguel, who had worked alongside her father for 15 years before his own age forced him to lighter work. They stood beneath the cottonwood tree where her mother was also buried, claimed by cholera when Olivia was just 7, and they said their words while the wind carried red dust across everything like a burial shroud. After they left, Miguel approached her on the porch, his weathered face creased with concern. "Miss Olivia, you cannot be thinking what I fear you are thinking." "I am thinking exactly that, Miguel. The contract specifies delivery by June 15th. That is 28 days from now. The route is possible if the weather holds and nothing goes wrong. You cannot drive 300 cattle alone. It is madness. Sell them. Take what you can get and move to town, find respectable work." She looked at him steadily, this man who had been like an uncle to her. "My father spent 3 years building this herd. He negotiated that contract personally with the railroad buyers. It represents everything he worked for, everything he wanted to leave me. If I sell now, I will get perhaps 30 cents on the dollar. If I deliver as contracted, I will have enough money to keep this ranch, to hire help, to build something lasting. I will not throw away his life's work because people think a woman cannot do what needs doing." Miguel's eyes were sad but not surprised. He had known her since she was a child. "Then you understand I am too old to ride with you. My bones could not take such a journey." "I know, Miguel. I would not ask it of you, but I need you to stay here, watch over the ranch, and pray I make it through." He nodded slowly, then removed the silver cross from around his neck, the one his own mother had given him in Mexico 50 years before. "Then take this. You will need all the prayers you can carry." She accepted it, feeling the weight of his faith and fear combined, and tied it around her own neck. She spent 2 days preparing. She selected her father's best horse, a sturdy dun gelding named Cisco with good stamina and steady nerves. She packed light, bedroll, slicker, ammunition for her Winchester rifle and her father's Colt revolver, coffee, hardtack, jerky, beans, and a pot. She wore men's clothing because skirts were suicide on horseback for such a journey, though she knew it would draw commentary in every town she passed. Her father's hat, his boots cut down and restuffed to fit her smaller feet, his leather gloves. On the 3rd morning, she rose before dawn and began pushing the herd north. 300 cattle, primarily Herefords mixed with some Longhorns, moving like a river of brown and white across the desert floor. She worked them carefully, using techniques her father had drilled into her over years. Never push too hard, keep them calm. Let them graze as they moved, find water every day. Cisco proved invaluable, a horse who understood cattle work instinctively, who could cut and turn without her guidance. The first week was the hardest. Her body, though strong from ranch work, was not conditioned for 18 hours a day in the saddle. Every muscle screamed. Her hands blistered even through the gloves. The sun burned her face despite her hat, turning her skin red then brown. At night she would make a small fire, eat cold beans straight from the can because she was too exhausted to cook, and collapse onto her bedroll with her rifle beside her, listening to the cattle settling and the coyotes calling in the darkness. She passed through small settlements, drawing stares everywhere. In one, a cluster of adobe buildings around a dried-up well, an old woman spat in the dust as she drove the herd past. In another, 3 cowboys lounging outside a saloon watched her with undisguised interest that made her hand drift toward her revolver, but they did not approach. She did not stop longer than necessary to water the herd, to purchase a few supplies, to ask about the trail ahead. The loneliness was worse than the physical pain. Days would pass with no human voice but her own, talking to Cisco, to the cattle, to the empty sky. She found herself having conversations with her father, telling him about the day's progress, asking his advice, hearing his answers in her memory. At night, the enormity of the empty land pressed down on her, making her feel impossibly small, insignificant, utterly vulnerable. But the cattle moved north. 20 miles one day, 15 the next, 18 the day after. She lost 3 steers to accident and exhaustion, found water when she needed it, avoided the worst of the desert heat by starting before dawn and resting during the hottest part of the day. She learned to read the cattle's mood, to anticipate problems, to handle situations her father had described, but she had never faced alone. A rattlesnake that spooked the herd one afternoon, causing a brief stampede that took her 2 hours to contain and cost her 1 more steer with a broken leg she had to shoot. A dry creek bed that seemed like good shelter until a flash flood from distant mountains came roaring through at midnight, forcing her to move the herd in darkness. A sick calf she doctored back to health with techniques she prayed she remembered correctly. 17 days after leaving her father's ranch, having covered approximately 150 miles, she reached the town of Silver Springs, a mining settlement that had sprung up around a silver strike and grown into something approaching civilization. She brought the herd to a holding area outside town and rode in to resupply, her body aching, her spirit exhausted, but her determination unshaken. The general store owner was a woman, which felt like a blessing, until the woman looked at her with something between pity and contempt. Driving cattle alone, what kind of fool notion is that? The kind where I honor a contract and save my ranch. Olivia counted out coins for coffee, beans, bacon, and ammunition. You will not make it. A woman alone, it is unnatural. You should find a man, let him finish this madness. Olivia met her eyes. If I could find a man I trusted, perhaps I would, but my father is dead, and I will not hand over my future to a stranger who might decide the herd belongs to him once we reach Prescott. I will finish what I started. The woman shook her head but took the money and provided the supplies. As Olivia was leaving, she called out, "There is a cowboy been in town 3 days, waiting for his partner to recover from a knife wound. Quiet fellow, professional. If you were smart, you would hire him for the last stretch." Pride is a cold companion when you are dying alone in the desert. Olivia did not respond, but the words followed her out into the street. She was leading her resupplied horse back toward the cattle when she saw him. He was leaning against the post outside the doctor's office, a tall man in his mid-20s with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of smoke. He wore the practical clothing of someone who lived on horseback, worn denim, scuffed boots, a leather vest over a faded shirt. His gun belt sat easy on his hips, and his hands, she noticed, were scarred and capable. He was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. Not the leering interest of the men in the smaller settlements, not the contempt of those who thought her mad. Something else. Something measuring and respectful. She nodded to him as she might to any stranger and kept walking. She did not need complications. She had 100 miles left, give or take, and less than 2 weeks to cover it if she wanted any cushion against disaster. That night, camped with her herd 5 miles north of Silver Springs, she allowed herself the luxury of a real fire and hot coffee. She was calculating days and miles, her father's old journal open on her lap when she heard the horse approaching. Her rifle was in her hands before she consciously decided to pick it up. The rider came into her firelight slowly, hands visible, and she recognized the cowboy from town. Up close, she could see more details. A strong jaw, a nose that had been broken at least once, a scar along his left cheekbone. But it was his eyes that held her attention, gray and direct and surprisingly gentle. "I mean no harm," he said quietly, staying in the saddle. "My name is Quinn Ashford. I have been working cattle since I was 14 years old, and I have ridden on 6 major drives. I heard in town that you are headed to Prescott alone. I am headed that direction myself, and I would be willing to ride with you, help with the herd, for fair wages." "I cannot afford fair wages," Olivia said, the rifle still pointed in his general direction. "And I do not know you from Adam." "Why would you make such an offer?" "Because I have 2 sisters back in Kansas, and I hope if they were ever in similar circumstances, someone might offer them aid without expectation of taking advantage." He paused. "And because my partner is healing but will not be fit to ride for another 2 weeks. I was planning to leave him here with the doctor and move on, but work is scarce this season. 100 miles of honest work would see me through until I can find a crew hiring." "What happened to your partner?" "Bar fight. Not his fault, not particularly his victory either. I was not there. I had gone to check on our horses. By the time I returned, he had a knife in his ribs and the other fellow was dead. Self-defense, the sheriff agreed, but Danny needs time to heal." Olivia studied him. She had become good at reading men out of necessity, at seeing the difference between those who meant harm and those who did not. This man, this Quinn Ashford, sat his horse like someone comfortable in his own skin. His offer sounded genuine. And the woman at the store had mentioned him, which meant his story was consistent. More than that, she was tired. Bone deep, soul tired. The thought of someone else helping with night watch, with the endless management of 300 animals, with the simple human task of conversation, was almost painfully appealing. "What kind of wages?" she asked, lowering the rifle slightly. "Whatever you think fair when we reach Prescott. I trust you to be honest about what you can afford once you have been paid for the herd. That is a significant amount of trust to place in a stranger. You are driving 300 cattle alone across 250 miles of hard country. You do not strike me as someone who cheats people." Despite herself, she felt the corner of her mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, but close. "I am Olivia Dawson. If you are lying about your experience or your intentions, I will shoot you. I am a fair shot and I will not hesitate." "I would expect nothing less, Miss Dawson." "It is Miss Dawson for now. We will see about formalities later. There is coffee in the pot. We ride at dawn." He dismounted then, a fluid motion that spoke to years in the saddle, and led his horse, a fine bay mare, to the edge of her camp. He moved with economical grace, taking care not to spook her cattle, setting up his own bedroll at a respectful distance. When he poured coffee, he did so quietly, and when he settled by the fire, he did not press her with questions or conversation. They sat in companionable silence for perhaps 20 minutes before she finally spoke. "How did you know I was headed to Prescott specifically?" The bartender at the saloon mentioned it. said a crazy woman was driving cattle alone and had asked about the trail to Prescott. The description matched. "I imagine crazy woman is the kindest thing I have been called." "You are brave," he said simply. "Brave or desperate, and either way worthy of respect." She looked at him across the fire, this stranger who had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not quite dared to voice. "My father died 3 weeks ago." Hart gave out. "He had a contract to deliver this herd, and I inherited it along with the ranch and the debt. If I do not fulfill the contract, I lose everything. So yes, desperate is part of it, but also I want to prove it can be done. I want to prove I am capable of more than what the world expects of me." Quinn nodded slowly. "My father wanted me to become a banker, follow him into the family business, wear a suit, count money. I lasted 6 months after I turned 18 before I lit out for Wyoming and found work on a ranch. He disowned me, said I was throwing away my future on a romantic fantasy. Maybe he was right, but I have never regretted the choice. Sometimes the hard path is the right one, even when everyone tells you it is foolish. Your mother died when I was young, pneumonia. Mine too. Different disease, same result." They shared a look of mutual understanding, the recognition of others who had lost too much too young. Then Olivia set down her cup and stood. "I take first watch. You can spell me at midnight. We move at dawn and push hard until mid-morning, rest through the heat, then drive until dark. I want to make 20 miles a day minimum." "Understood." She walked out to circle the herd, listening to them settling for the night, aware of Quinn banking the fire and preparing his bedroll. She did not know if trusting him was wisdom or foolishness, but her instincts, honed by 3 weeks alone in unforgiving country, told her he was what he claimed. And the relief of sharing the burden, even with a stranger, was almost overwhelming. The next morning, they fell into a rhythm as natural as breathing. Quinn was everything he had claimed: experienced, competent, anticipating problems before they developed. He worked the far side of the herd while she took the near, and together they moved the cattle more efficiently than she had managed alone. When a young steer tried to break away mid-morning, Quinn was there to turn it back. When they reached a water source at noon, he handled half the herd while she managed the other half, cutting the watering time significantly. They did not talk much during the day, focusing on the work, but that evening, as they made camp and cooked a proper meal for the first time in weeks, Olivia found herself asking questions. Where had he worked? What drives had he been on? What had he seen in his years following cattle across the Western Territories? Quinn answered easily, his voice low and pleasant, telling stories of Montana winters and Texas summers, of stampedes and river crossings, and the 1,000 small dramas of moving cattle across vast distances. He asked about her ranch, her father, her plans for after the delivery, and he listened with genuine interest. "You plan to run the ranch yourself?" he asked, stirring beans over the fire. "I do. Hire a few hands, build the herd back up, and keep working. It is what my father wanted, what he trained me for, even if he never quite admitted he was doing it. Many men would not accept working for a woman boss. Then they will not be hired. I do not have time for men whose pride is more fragile than their work ethic." Quinn smiled at that, a real smile that transformed his serious face. Fair enough. Over the next few days, Olivia found herself relaxing in ways she had not allowed herself since her father's death. With Quinn handling half the work, she could sleep more deeply, knowing someone else was on watch. She could take time to doctor a lame cow properly instead of pushing past problems. She could eat hot meals and drink coffee that did not taste like desperation. More than the practical help, though, was the companionship. Quinn was easy to be around. neither pushing for more than she offered nor maintaining such distance that it felt unfriendly. They talked in the evenings, sharing stories and opinions, finding common ground on everything from the best way to treat saddle sores to their favorite time of day in open country. He made her laugh with his dry observations about some of the characters he had worked with, and she found herself telling him things she had not spoken aloud to anyone, about her fears and hopes, about the pressure of proving herself in a world determined to see her fail. On the 5th day after Quinn joined her, they reached a difficult stretch of broken country where the trail narrowed between rocky outcroppings. Olivia was scouting ahead when her horse stepped wrong, and she found herself thrown, landing hard on stone that knocked the breath from her lungs. She lay stunned for a moment, aware of pain but not yet able to catalog its source. Then Quinn was there, kneeling beside her, his hands gentle as he checked for broken bones. "Do not move yet. Where does it hurt?" "Everywhere," she managed, then drew a careful breath. "But nothing feels broken. Just bruised. You landed on rock. You are lucky you did not crack your skull." His voice was tight with concern, and when she finally focused on his face, she saw real fear there. "I am fine," she said, sitting up slowly despite his protests. "I have been thrown before. Not while you were alone with 300 cattle in the middle of nowhere." He stood and offered his hand. "You could have been seriously hurt, Olivia." It was the first time he had used her first name without the formality of Miss. And something in the way he said it, with all that worry and relief mixed together, made her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with her fall. She took his hand and let him help her up, aware of the strength in his grip, the steadiness of his presence. They stood there for a moment longer than necessary, hands still clasped, eyes meeting, and Olivia saw in his expression something that both frightened and thrilled her. He cared. This near stranger cared whether she was hurt, cared in a way that went beyond professional courtesy or neighborly concern. "Thank you," she said softly and squeezed his hand before letting go. "For being here, for riding with me." "There is nowhere else I would rather be," Quinn said, and the simple honesty of it struck her like a physical blow. They continued. Olivia remounted despite protesting muscles, and by evening they had made good progress. But something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings neither had quite named but both recognized. That night, they sat closer by the fire, and when Quinn told a story that made her laugh, his eyes lingered on her face with undisguised warmth. The days began to blur together in the best possible way. The work was still hard, the hours still long, but with Quinn beside her, it felt manageable. More than manageable, it felt right. They developed an unspoken communication, reading each other's intentions with barely a gesture. He would move left and she would shift right, covering the herd between them. He would point to a distant landmark and she would nod, understanding they should angle that direction. They talked more freely now, the formality of those first days giving way to genuine friendship. Quinn told her about his childhood in Missouri, the strictness of his father's expectations. The moment he realized he would rather struggle as a free man than prosper in a cage of someone else's design. Olivia shared memories of her mother, vague and precious after so many years, and the complicated love she had felt for her father, who had taught her everything, but could never quite acknowledge that a woman might be worthy of the lessons. "He loved you," Quinn said one evening, after she had confessed her fear that her father had been disappointed she was not a son. "If he taught you all of this, trusted you with the ranch and the contract, he loved you and believed in you. Maybe he could not say it the way you needed to hear, but actions speak loud enough." The validation, coming from this man she was coming to trust more than she had trusted anyone, settled something deep in her chest. "Thank you for saying that. I am only speaking truth." 8 days after Quinn joined her, 46 days after she had left her ranch, they crested a rise and saw Prescott spread out in the valley below, the railroad tracks gleaming like silver threads in the late afternoon sun. Olivia reined in Cisco and just stared, unable to quite believe she had made it. 200 miles alone, 50 with Quinn beside her, and here she was, alive and intact with nearly 300 head of cattle still under her control. "You did it," Quinn said quietly, bringing his mare alongside her. "You actually did it." "We did it," she corrected, looking at him. "I could not have made it without you, Quinn. These last 50 miles would have broken me if I had been alone. You would have found a way." "You are the most determined person I have ever met," he smiled. "But I am glad I could help. These have been the best days I have had in longer than I can remember." They held each other's gaze, and Olivia felt her heart beating hard against her ribs. She had come to care for this man more than she had intended, more than was probably wise given that their agreement had been for him to help her to Prescott, and nothing more. Once the cattle were delivered, once she was paid, he would move on to his next job and she would return to her ranch, and this strange, perfect interlude would end. The thought was unbearable, but she pushed it aside for now and urged Cisco forward. "Let us finish this." They brought the herd into Prescott carefully, moving through streets that parted to let them pass, drawing stares and shouts and pointing fingers. The stockyards were on the eastern edge of town, and the foreman, a big man named Harrison with a beard like a broom, came out to meet them with undisguised surprise. "Olivia Dawson?" he asked, consulting a clipboard. "From the Dawson Ranch outside Las Cruces?" "Yes, sir." "Delivering under contract negotiated with your buyer last fall. 293 head, primarily Herefords." Harrison looked from her to Quinn to the milling cattle. "James Dawson was supposed to deliver this herd. Where is he? My father died 5 weeks ago. I am here in his stead, fulfilling the contract as written." The terms did not specify who had to deliver, only that the cattle arrive by June 15th. "I am 4 days early." The foreman's expression was complicated, surprise and respect warring with skepticism. "You drove these cattle from Las Cruces by yourself, most of the way. Mr. Ashford joined me for the final 50 miles. Harrison turned to Quinn. "That true?" "Every word. Miss Dawson had already driven 200 miles alone when I met her outside Silver Springs. I have never seen anyone, man or woman, handle cattle better or show more courage." The foreman grunted, then gestured to his men. "Let us get them penned and counted. If the numbers and quality match the contract, you will be paid in full. Though I got to say, miss, you have my respect." This is no small feat. The process took 2 hours. The cattle were driven into pens, counted, inspected for disease or injury. The numbers came in at 293, 7 lost over 250 miles, which Harrison admitted was better than many professional drives managed. The quality was good, the cattle healthy despite the journey. Finally, Harrison returned to where Olivia and Quinn waited, and he handed her a bank draft. $1,250 as contracted, paid in full. "I will tell the buyer this story, miss. I expect he will remember it next time he needs cattle." Olivia took the draft with hands that trembled slightly, looking down at numbers that represented not just money but validation, proof, the security of her future. "Thank you, sir. Thank your father for raising you right, and thank yourself for having the grit to see it through." He tipped his hat and walked away. Olivia stood there in the dusty stockyard as the sun sank toward the horizon, holding the draft, and felt the weight of the past 6 weeks finally lift. She had done it. Against every expectation, against all the voices telling her to give up or give in, she had done exactly what she set out to do. Quinn stood beside her, silent, letting her have the moment. When she finally looked up at him, there were tears on her cheeks. She had not realized she was crying. "I need to pay you," she said, her voice unsteady. "What is fair? Keep your money, Olivia. You need it more than I do." "That is not acceptable. You worked. You earned wages." "Then pay me $50 and call it even." "Quinn, that is less than half what you deserve." He stepped closer, his gray eyes serious and soft at once. "I did not ride with you for money. I rode with you because from the moment I saw you in Silver Springs, walking alone through that town like you owned the world despite everything against you, I was drawn to you in a way I have never experienced before. These past 8 days have only confirmed what I suspected from the start. I am falling in love with you, Olivia Dawson, and no amount of money could ever match the value of the time I have spent by your side." Olivia's breath caught. The words she had not dared hope for, spoken with such simple honesty that she could not doubt their truth. "Quinn, I do not know what to say." "Say you feel something too. Say this does not have to end here." She looked up at him, this good man who had appeared when she needed him most, who had worked beside her without ego or expectation, who had made her laugh and think and feel safe in ways she had forgotten were possible. "I feel everything," she whispered. "I've been trying not to because I thought you would leave, but I feel everything, Quinn. I am falling in love with you too." He smiled then, a slow, brilliant smile that made him look years younger, and he reached up to cup her face gently in his scarred, capable hands. "Then let me stay. Let me ride back to your ranch with you, work as your hand, court you properly, and see where this takes us. I have been drifting for 8 years, and I am tired of drifting. I want to be somewhere that matters with someone who matters. I want to be with you. What about your partner?" "Danny in Silver Springs. I will send him money and a letter explaining where I have gone. He is a friend, not a permanent partner. He will understand, probably make fun of me for falling in love like some character in a dime novel, but he will understand." Olivia laughed through her tears, and then, standing in the dusty stockyard with the last light of day gilding everything gold, she reached up and kissed him. It was not her first kiss, but it felt like it, felt like the beginning of everything that mattered. Quinn kissed her back with a tenderness that made her heart ache, his hand still cradling her face like she was something precious and fragile, even though he knew better than anyone how strong she truly was. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Olivia rested her forehead against his. "Yes, stay with me. Come back to the ranch. Let us see where this goes." "Yes," he echoed and kissed her again. They stayed in Prescott that night, renting 2 rooms at the hotel, though both of them lay awake in their separate beds, thinking about the future spreading out before them like open country waiting to be explored. In the morning, they purchased supplies and sent a letter to Danny along with $100, more than enough to cover his recovery and travel. Then they began the journey back to Las Cruces, riding side by side, no longer employer and hired hand but partners in something neither had quite defined but both understood. The trip back took longer without the pressure of the contract deadline, and they were glad of it. They rode easily, stopping in towns to eat real meals and sleep in real beds. They talked endlessly, learning each other's histories and dreams, discovering shared values and complementary differences. Quinn told her about his plans to one day own land of his own, to build something lasting. Olivia shared her vision for the ranch, expanding slowly, breeding quality cattle, creating something her father would be proud of. They talked about practical matters too, how they would manage the ranch together, what roles each would take, how to navigate the inevitable gossip and judgment that would come from an unmarried woman and man working and living in close proximity. Quinn proposed a solution before they even reached Las Cruces. "Marry me," he said one evening as they camped under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Not because of propriety or to avoid scandal, though those are considerations. "Marry me because I love you and I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up beside you every morning and work beside you every day and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to be your husband and your partner and the father of your children if we are blessed with them. Marry me, Olivia." She looked at him across the fire, this man who had ridden into her life at exactly the right moment, who had proven himself in every way that mattered. The answer was easy. "Yes, yes, I will marry you, Quinn Ashford." They were married in Las Cruces 3 days after their return, in the small church with Miguel and the circuit preacher, and a handful of neighbors who had attended her father's funeral. Olivia wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in a trunk, altered slightly to fit. Quinn bought a new shirt and wore his best boots. They spoke their vows with steady voices and clear eyes, promising to love and honor and cherish each other through whatever came. Miguel cried openly, hugging them both after the ceremony. "James would be so proud of you," he told Olivia. "You did what he could not have done, and you found a good man besides. You are a blessing, child." They held a small reception at the ranch, and Quinn met the neighbors and learned the land, and Olivia felt pieces of her life clicking into place like a puzzle she had not known was incomplete. That night, alone in the house that was now theirs together, they came together with a passion tempered by tenderness, learning each other's bodies with the same care and attention they had given to learning each other's minds and hearts. The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. Quinn proved to be everything Olivia had believed he was. Hardworking, honest, fair with the hired hands they eventually brought on as the ranch grew. He deferred to her experience with cattle while contributing his own knowledge from years on different ranges. They became a team, legendary in the region for their partnership and success. 3 years after their marriage, Olivia gave birth to their first child, a son they named James after her father. Quinn held his boy with hands that trembled, looking at Olivia with such love and wonder that she fell for him all over again. 2 years later came a daughter, Emma, with her father's gray eyes and her mother's determination. And 3 years after that, another son, Michael, who from the beginning showed signs of being as wild and free-spirited as the land he was born into. The ranch prospered. They expanded gradually, never overreaching, building a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing. Other ranchers began consulting Olivia for advice, recognizing her expertise even if some still grumbled about a woman in such a role. She took satisfaction in proving them wrong year after year, in showing through example that capability had nothing to do with gender, and everything to do with knowledge, courage, and determination. Quinn became a leader in the community too, respected for his work ethic and his integrity. But he never forgot that he had come to this life by chance, by seeing a woman in a dusty town and choosing to offer help. He told the story often, embellishing it slightly over the years, always making sure people understood that Olivia had driven 200 miles alone before he ever appeared. "She saved herself," he would say. "I just had the privilege of riding the last 50 miles with her." On their 10th anniversary, they sat on the porch of the ranch house they had expanded and improved, watching their children play in the yard while the sun set over land that was theirs, truly theirs, earned through sweat and sacrifice, and the kind of love that grew stronger with every challenge overcome. "Do you ever regret it?" Olivia asked, leaning against Quinn's shoulder. "Choosing this life, choosing me." He turned to look at her, his gray eyes still as warm and direct as they had been that first night when he rode into her camp. Not for a single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Olivia. This life, this family, this ranch, it is everything I never knew I wanted. I love you more today than I did 10 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." She kissed him, soft and sweet, tasting of coffee and contentment. "I love you too. Thank you for seeing me that day in Silver Springs. Thank you for offering to ride with me. Thank you for saying yes." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky, the same stars that had witnessed their journey together, that had hung over every mile of that long drive that changed both their lives forever. 20 years after that first drive, when their children were grown and the ranch was thriving beyond anything Olivia's father could have imagined, she sometimes took out the journal she had kept during those 6 weeks. She would read the entries, sparse and factual at first, then gradually becoming longer, more reflective, especially after Quinn appeared. She read about her fear and loneliness, about her determination, about the moment she realized she was falling in love with the quiet cowboy who had asked nothing and offered everything. Quinn found her one evening with the journal open on her lap, tears on her cheeks. He sat beside her, taking her hand. "What are you thinking about?" "About how much can change in 50 miles, she said softly. "About how the hardest journey of my life brought me the greatest gift. About how grateful I am that you were in Silver Springs that day, waiting for your partner to heal, available exactly when I needed you." "Fate," Quinn said simply. "Or luck, or providence. Whatever it was, I am grateful too." He squeezed her hand. "You know, I never told you this, but I almost did not offer to ride with you. I thought you would say no, thought you would see it as charity or an insult to your capability. I almost let pride keep me silent. What changed your mind?" "I looked at you and I thought, what if no one helps her and something happens? What if I could make a difference and I do nothing? I realized that the discomfort of possible rejection was worth less than nothing compared to the value of offering aid to someone who might need it. Best decision I ever made." Olivia leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the solidity of his presence. "Best decision I ever made was saying yes." They grew old together on that ranch, watching their children have children of their own, seeing the land they loved passed down through generations. The story of Olivia's drive became family legend, told and retold, embellished and celebrated. How she had driven 300 cattle alone for 200 miles after her father's death. How a cowboy had ridden beside her for the last 50 miles. How that journey had forged a partnership and a love that lasted a lifetime. When Quinn died, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, Olivia held his hand and whispered thank you for everything, for all of it. She mourned him deeply but without regret, knowing they had used every year, every day, every moment they had been given. She had loved him and been loved in return, and that was more than many people ever received. She lived another 5 years after Quinn's death, remaining sharp and engaged, teaching her grandchildren about cattle and land management, about courage and determination, and the importance of choosing your own path, even when the world says it is impossible. She told them the story of the drive, of their grandfather riding into her camp that night, of how love can find you in the most unexpected places if you are brave enough to recognize it. On a spring morning in 1929, Olivia Dawson Ashford died peacefully in her sleep in the ranch house she had fought so hard to keep, surrounded by family and memory and the land she had loved her entire life. She was 68 years old, and she had lived fully, bravely, exactly as she had wanted to. At her funeral, her eldest son James spoke of his mother's courage, her strength. her unwavering commitment to living life on her own terms. He told the story of the drive one more time, making sure everyone understood what it meant, what it represented. "My mother drove cattle alone for 200 miles in 1884, he said, his voice steady despite his grief. "At a time when women were told they could not, should not, must not attempt such things. She did it anyway because it was necessary and because she refused to accept other people's limitations. And then, when help appeared in the form of a cowboy with a good heart and steady hands, she was wise enough to accept it, brave enough to trust it, and open enough to let it transform into love. She taught us that strength and vulnerability are not opposites but partners. That asking for help is not weakness. That love, real love, is built on respect and partnership and choosing each other every single day. She was extraordinary, and we are all better for having known her." They buried her beside Quinn under the cottonwood tree that had grown tall and strong over the decades, its roots deep in the earth they had both loved. And on her headstone, at her own request made years before, was inscribed a simple epitaph that captured everything that mattered. Olivia Dawson Ashford, 1861–1929. She drove cattle alone for 200 miles. He rode beside her for the last 50. Together they built a life that mattered. The ranch continued through the generations. The story passed down like a treasured inheritance. The values Olivia and Quinn had embodied: courage, determination, partnership. Love became the foundation on which their descendants built their own lives. And sometimes, on clear spring evenings when the stars emerged bright and close, family members swore they could feel the presence of those two souls, still together, still riding side by side across the land they had claimed as their own through sheer force of will and the transformative power of love. The story of Olivia Dawson, who drove cattle alone for 200 miles, and Quinn Ashford, who rode beside her for the last 50, became more than just family history. It became a testament to what is possible when courage meets opportunity, when determination meets support, when two people find each other at exactly the right moment and choose to build something beautiful together. It became a love story for the ages, rooted in the harsh reality of the Wild West, but transcending it through the simple truth that love, real and lasting love, can bloom in the most unexpected places. That sometimes the hardest journeys lead to the greatest destinations. That asking for help and offering help are both acts of bravery, and that the best partnerships are those built on mutual respect, shared values, and the willingness to ride side by side through whatever challenges the world might present. In the end, Olivia and Quinn's legacy was not just the successful ranch or the children they raised or the barriers they broke. It was the proof, living and lasting, that love built on friendship and respect and genuine partnership can withstand any trial. That two people who start as strangers can become everything to each other if they are willing to be honest and vulnerable and brave. Their story lived on, generation after generation, inspiring others to take chances, to help when help is needed, to remain open to love even in the most unlikely circumstances. And the ranch they built together remained standing, solid and prosperous, a monument to what two determined people can accomplish when they refuse to let the world tell them what is possible and instead define possibility for themselves. She drove cattle alone for 200 miles. He rode beside her for the last 50. Together, they built forever.